Success in Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome back to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It is Monday, May 19th, which means it's time for Andrew Hoffman. Andy, how are you?
Oh, fantastic, Kerry. Couldn't be better on this beautiful day.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day here, too. And, well, we had the Indian elections, and that means it's time for more precious metals market manipulation. Not that it ever ends, right?
No, it's at an all-time high. And again, and if anyone listens to my my audio blog from Friday that was titled "Something Very, Very Bad Will Happen Very, Very Soon," I really laid out the whole chronology of how it really accelerated. I mean, it actually was ongoing through the entire since gold bottomed in 2000, and accelerated, of course, in 2011 when gold hit its high, and silver, of course, and then really April 2013 is when the cartel, that is the U.S. government and the leading banks, realized that this is getting really serious. We need to keep this down 24/7, or else it's going to do something crazy. And that's what we've seen. I mean, unprecedented levels of Six Sigma activity, not just in stocks, but in bonds, in currency, in the yen-dollar trade, for instance, and of course in treasury bonds. And we could talk about that in a second. We can also talk about Dmitry Speck's new book called The Gold Cartel. So lots of news to talk about and lots of manipulations.
Yeah, I mean, for a while, it looked like gold was really going to break out today, but never one to let the markets outdo them. Right now, it's just up nominally today, right?
Yeah, I mean, 1,300 has been the level that they have been protecting now for 10 months in a row, essentially since the initial crash that they orchestrated on April 12, 2013, which was the day that Obama had a closed-door meeting with the 15 top too-big-to-fail CEOs, in which Goldman Sachs put out a selling short recommendation. So clearly, this has been the line in the sand. It's at a very marginal level where most gold producers can't even be profitable, and the industry in itself is falling apart at these levels, let alone the battlefield $20 silver, as I call it, which is now going on 6 years. There's not going to be a silver industry pretty soon. It's that bad.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And hey, I guess the U.S. government is too big to fail as well, isn't it?
Well, again, it's all about kicking the can. And, you can look, I've discussed forever all the various manipulations that have gone over the years. We even posted the chart of, 1,000 years of pegged gold prices. But then, of course, just in recent times, you had, of course, the London Gold Pool. And then you had what they did in the late 70s with the Hunt brothers. And then, of course, there was the gold leasing activities that went on, starting with the strong dollar policy with Summers and Rubin and back in the 90s. And, of course, what we've seen right now. It's just, look, the more money that gets printed, the more gold and silver become the enemies. And I really do think people should buy Dmitry Speck's book called The Gold Cartel. You can buy it on Amazon. It's fantastic. It really goes over what I and others in our camp have been talking about for some time. And again, today's article was called Gold Always Wins in the End. I mean, every time throughout millennia that the governments try to maintain a status quo where they get to have all the power and create all the money, they destroy themselves. And I mean, it just couldn't be more obvious where we stand today. Global economies everywhere, without exception, are collapsing. Surging inflation everywhere, without exception. So, tell me, how is it that when Ben Bernanke is now giving $250,000 dinners, sponsored by JP Morgan, to all the top hedge fund managers who are using, their other people's money to ask Bernanke questions, how is it that Bernanke, who says there's a recovery, says privately that he doesn't think the Fed funds rate will reach 4% out, it's 4% historical average in his lifetime?
Yeah, well, what is his life expectancy exactly?
Well, he's 60 right now. Life expectancy is probably 80. So he's basically saying ZERP to infinity. The only question left is when the political BS of Whirlybird Janet and pretending to taper ends, when that changes and it becomes the official QE to infinity. And again, as I've been talking about and we talked about last week ad nauseum, I do believe that for the first time ever. The Fed actually is tapering right now, but not because of the right reason. They're not tapering because of recovery. They're tapering because interest rates are plunging, as I predicted they would. And I said that it would break through 2.6, which was their line in the sand. 2 days later, it broke through 2.5. And here we are again this morning. Every time it gets under 2.5, they mysteriously spike it up. They're going to lose this battle too, and eventually they're going to lose all of the pre-taper gains as the entire world starts to bet that QE to infinity is coming. And it's no different than what's going on in the Japanese Nikkei. It closed at 14,006 today as the Bank of Japan, again, desperate to maintain those pre-Abenomics gains that came in just before Abenomics was announced, because without them, they have no, quote, proof that Abenomics is working. And of course, if you look at the actual economy and inflation in Japan, everyone knows that. But again, the markets are now used completely as propaganda. And according to the propagandists, if the Nikkei stays above 14,000, hold its gains, it must mean Abenomics is working. Just like if the 10-year rate on the Treasury stays above 2.6%, that must mean that tapering is working.
Yeah. And, interesting thing, while the 10-year interest rate is going down, mortgage rates have stayed the same. So something fishy there as well, huh?
Well, again, rates going down, it really only benefits the banks. One, because they're given all this money to speculate in the markets. I mean, that's what ZIRP is about, buying treasuries off of the balance sheets on a daily basis. And of course, that's what QE is about. So they benefit from the lower rates, especially because they are informed about what's going on. Heck, there's a committee, I forgot what it's called, like the Long-Term Treasury Financing Committee, where the heads of JP Morgan and all them talk with the Treasury about what they should be doing going forward. So they benefit from it. But as the economy worsens and worsens and worsens, and the banks lend less and less of that free money out, meaning they just simply put it into the markets that are protected by the government, it just makes it tighter, and it makes the economy worse, and it makes it harder for people to get credit. And as we discussed last week, I think it's 56% of all Americans have subprime credit. And as things get worse and worse and inflation gets higher and higher, there's just no way anyone's going to get a better interest rate on anything, no matter what the Fed does with rates.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And where are they going to go? They've been at zero for 6 years. Are they going to go negative, like it's not just rumored, where the ECB pretty much said it's going to do that at its June meeting? Can you imagine? They're actually going to do that. They're going to make rates negative so that they're trying to force banks who are insolvent to lend. Now, this weekend, I don't know if anyone saw this, Deutsche Bank, which is the largest bank in Germany, the fourth largest in all of Europe, and by the way, under investigation now for manipulating everything from LIBOR to gold, they announced kind of an emergency announcement that they need to raise 8 billion euros quickly, and they found a buyer at a 30% discount to the market price. Now remember, it was only last June where the head of the FDIC here in the States said Deutsche Bank is horribly undercapitalized with no margin for error. So anyway, if anyone thinks that the banks are going to be lending out money when during the supposed recovery, they are desperate for capital, it's just unbelievable how few people do connect the dots of what's actually going on here.
Yeah, it's just one big kleptocracy, huh?
I mean, it provides me with a lot to write, that's for sure. But it's exhausting. Again, we do see the mainstream starting to join the fun here, because more and more when you look at Yahoo Finance, the head story is not things great, it's things bad, but it's kind of an upsurge of around the world understanding of what's going on based on personal experience that's eventually going to cause gold to win in the end. And we haven't even gotten to food prices yet, let alone the Indian election.
Those food prices are just going through the roof, even in the U.S., but elsewhere in the world, they're going up even more.
Yeah, actually, at the moment, they're probably going up faster in the U.S. than anywhere else. So, the U.S. foods, the BLS Foodstuffs Index is up 24% since the beginning of this year. And, all those people saying, the droughts in California, they'll abate. No, they won't abate. Some people believe that California, which is a desert and should never have supported this many people, some people believe that somehow it's a passing fad. But, there's a good chance that what's going on there is going to last for decades, if not centuries. And right now, it's at its worst point ever. And we've already discussed how a third to a half of all the agricultural produce products in America come from California, which already has the highest inflation and the lowest debt rating and the lowest credit rating and the highest debt and the highest taxes in the state. I mean, this is really catastrophic. You throw in the Brazilian drought, which is also at its worst point yet and expected to get worse, which is why coffee and soybeans prices are exploding. And you realize just how dire the situation is going to get. We talked last week about how Landry's Restaurants, one of the biggest restaurant chains in America, said things are so bad, it's almost at the point they want to put out a sign that says going out of business because of high food costs. So instead, they're going to be raising prices dramatically. And Safeway supermarkets, second largest chain in America, just said the same thing. Huge losses in the first quarter. They're going to be passing through prices. The same thing,
Chipotle.
you look at McDonald's and their dollar price menu. Campbell's Soup, horrible earnings this morning. Walmart citing all these things. I mean, this is when you see the PPI up much more than the CPI, you know that companies are hurting. So this is going to be an added strain to the economy when prices surge across the board from all these food manufacturers.
Yeah, Chipotle is raising their prices as well.
How can they not?
Yeah,
I mean, they want to stay in business, right? People really should look at this. I think it's this CNBC interview with the guy, the CEO of Landry's, and it's something called like the richest restaurateur warns of diners should expect higher prices. You really got to, I quoted him in one of my pieces last week. You really got to listen to this to realize just how dire the situation is from a guy who owns hundreds and hundreds of restaurants in many states. And then you throw in all the government socialism programs, the raising the minimum wage, Obamacare. These things only increase the cost of doing business and eventually get passed through to consumers.
Yeah, you better think about staying home and not going out to eat, but more when we return on the Financial Survival Network.
FSN Radio.
Warning, you might live in a no constitution zone. It's the shocking story you won't see on TV. Depending upon where you live in the United States, you may no longer have constitutional rights. Politicians are quietly squeezing the middle class to micromanage you and extract your wealth. Want to see how? Watch the free video at noconstitutionzone.com. Soon, you'll have the last laugh by using these cultural contraband tricks and profit like a king. That's noconstitutionzone.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
We are back. It's Monday. We're talking with Andrew Hoffman. So all this good news, Andy, and yet where are we here? We're looking at China and Vietnam squaring off. China sets up an oil rig in part of the South China Sea that was pretty much undisputed that it was Vietnamese territory. The Vietnamese riot and go after the ethnic Chinese, which there's always been uneasy tension because the ethnic Chinese pretty much own everything in Vietnam. They're the entrepreneurial class, and send the ethnic Chinese packing. Now the Chinese are mobilizing on the Vietnamese border, so no doubt the Vietnamese will be mobilizing and getting ready for war. And what's it all about here, huh?
Yeah, well, I actually started my article this morning talking of the historical irony of China and Vietnam potentially having a conflict because, of course, Vietnam was the nation that really catalyzed America's money printing spree and ultimately going off of the gold standard. And China is the country that is going to economically replace the United States as a superpower because of that very reason. Now, I'm sure that whatever goes on with China and Vietnam is not going to be much of a contest. But remember, now China is being challenged by Japan as well, who also is looking for nationalist reasons to rally behind, a nation that's falling apart economically, and Abenomics is falling apart. So all of a sudden they're militant. And then, of course, the big pink elephant is, China and Russia versus the United States. I mean, heck, we announced this morning, we accused China of hacking, and the Chinese government said, I can't believe you said that. You damaged your relations further. Remember, tomorrow, there's this huge historical meeting between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, the new president of China, where they're probably going to announce this, what they call Holy Grail natural gas deal and many other trade agreements, which may, by the way, be completely outside of the dollar. So we're talking about a new axis in the world that's rapidly changing. And I mean, what really catalyzed it is this Ukraine situation. I mean, why we, not to mention Syria and all the other places and Iran that we seem to be challenging. It's almost like we're looking for them, just like Japan's looking for a fight and Vietnam's looking for a fight. We are clearly looking for a fight too. And why anyone would want to pick a fight with Russia and China, which frankly, to me, are an unstoppable force, especially if they're combined, is beyond me. And it really rings more of the, governments looking for nationalist reasons to rally behind because they can't win the economic war.
Yeah, well, this is going to be interesting here because, they've gone at it before, Vietnam and China. I think it was about 20 years ago. They had a border skirmish. And, it's a test of China here because if they attack Vietnam, it's going to send all those other countries around there from the Philippines, Japan, Korea. It's all going to send them running into the arms of the U.S. or anybody that'll have them because it's going to shake up all those countries, traditional allies of the U.S., and perhaps even India will be thinking because they've had a number of border wars with China as well.
Well, India is is kind of a pet case of how to do things wrong. And, I've likened them many times to a financial apartheid where this tiny group of Fed-loving money printers somehow got in control of a nation of 1.5 billion rupee-hating, gold-loving people who understand the value of real money. And what we just saw, look, in December, we saw the BJP party pretty much across the board sweep out the kind of evil Congress party that has run the currency into the ground and imposed all those tariffs on gold and created a black market inadvertently. Well, now we just had the national election last week, and a guy named Narendra Modi from the BJP party won in a landslide. So we now have a pro-business, pro-gold party in office in India. And believe me, the pressure on them to get rid of those tariffs probably entirely is going to be very strong. And I have no doubt that black market or not, whether it's still there or not, this is going to cause a tremendous surge in Indian demand. And by the way, last year, Indian gold demand, even with the tariffs, was pretty darn strong, even without the black market, which was huge. And meanwhile, silver, which also had the tariffs, had record imports into India last year. So I expect India to be a very, very strong positive force in the physical gold and silver markets this year. And as for their politics, well, it remains to be seen what these new guys are going to do.
Yep, this will be interesting. But cozying up to China, I think in light of what's going on there, well, we'll have to see. Maybe even Australia will take note of the situation. And it will be good for defense companies, that's for sure. And hey, what about housing? That is falling through the floor. I see it here in Florida. A bunch of more houses have come onto the market. For a while, it was the moment a house came onto the market, it sold like instantaneously within days. Now the inventory is backing up. People can't get mortgages, and it's housing crash part 2. It's forming, and I think what you're going to see is that the powers that be in the government who have passed all these rules, making it much tougher to get a mortgage, within the next 30 to 60 days are going to go into panic mode. They are going to loosen the criteria. Not only are they going to loosen it, they are going to go way, way overboard. They're going to go back to the future, and you're going to see any person with a pulse will be able to get a mortgage, and that will pave the way for the next round of foreclosures and defaults.
Oh, they're already doing it. I mean, the subprime kind of loans, not just in the housing sector, but in the corporate sector and everywhere, have been exploding higher. So I have no doubt that they've already done this. Remember, the government, I think they originate or own, a half or 3/4 of all the mortgages in the country now because they've nationalized everything. So yeah, they'll kick the can as far as possible. And if you remember, it was this time a year ago where I wrote about it in our neighborhood here. I remember everyone talking about house prices and to the moon again. And it was for a very, very brief period. And then you had the taper talk and rates went up a whopping 1%. And that was the end of that. And here we are again. It's again the season. You can't be confused too much. Remember, this is the season where most sales people put houses on the market after winter. And yeah, you see, of course, a huge amount of houses coming on. But yeah, prices are not going up anymore. If anything, they're going down. And the houses around here, which last year were selling out, aren't selling. And this is just, remember, we're still pretty near the all-time lows in mortgage rates. But people don't have money anymore. And the housing bubble really that played out in the last year or two was mostly an institutional version that was based on Wall Street money that's now fleeing the sector. So with an economy falling, to me, the only way housing prices, with rare exceptions based on certain situations, that they can go back up again is if a true hyperinflation starts, in which case, it really doesn't matter on a real basis. You're not going to make those kind of gains. So I think the echo bubble came and passed here in the States. And of course, what's going on here is nothing compared to what you're seeing in places like China, where the housing starts and permits and sales are down 20% year over year, and they're starting to bail out cities, real estate companies left and right. We're talking about historic. I believe the Chinese credit bubble collapse is going to be the worst of all time, bar none.
Yeah, well, it's the fact that you need to get the government out of this market. They've done nothing but do harm and destruction to it. And until housing is allowed to be a free market, and that means the mortgage market especially, because without having a free market in housing finance, you're never going to have a free market in housing. Till that happens, it's just going to be dysfunctional like any other market.
Well, we don't have a free market in anything. And of course they can't. It's one of these things they say, well, if they just ended socialism, it would be better for the country, or if they just ended housing nationalization. But the point is, you can't. If you stop paying out food stamps, you have riots and civil war. If you stop, if Fannie Mae no longer nationalizes or originates mortgages, then there's no home buyers and the prices fall through the floor. If you stop manipulating the gold price, it goes from 1,300 to 5,300 in 2 seconds. If you stop supporting the stock market, if they took one day off the Fed from the interest rate markets, the 10-year would be down to 2%, because the whole world knows that they're going to hyperinflate with QE to infinity. So again, they can't stop doing these things. That's the nature of Ponzi schemes. They must keep growing larger, and they must keep doing so while confidence is maintained. The problem is that the propaganda doesn't work anymore. No one believes that there's an economic recovery. No one believes that there's no inflation. No one believes that there's de-escalation going on in the Ukraine, or that the Fed has ever been tapering until now, of course, when they're only doing it to save the markets from proving that they were wrong.
Yeah, isn't it great? Well, let's talk more about this when we return on the financialsurvivalnetwork.com.
FSN Radio.
Urgent alert. Ex-Secret Service agent claims it's worse than people know. One of Obama's former Secret Service agents recently smelled a rat. What he discovered inside our government was so devastating, he only saw one option. He quit. What's worse, he fears what he found could affect your job, your neighborhood, and most importantly, your family, very soon. It's worse than people know, he said in a recent interview, and I'm not trying to scare you either. We too share his concerns. This is why we've devoted the better part of 3 years collecting solutions for nearly all problems created by intrusive governments, and we've succeeded. Go to hiddensecrets1.info to check out all the details. Our panel of insiders have devised a legal but sneaky set of solutions to help you reclaim your privacy from the NSA, opt out of Obamacare, and make a bundle from little-known investments and small business opportunities. Simply visit hiddensecrets1.info. That's Hidden Secrets, the number 1.info.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And we're back with Andy Hoffman on the financialsurvivalnetwork.com. So, Andy, once the housing market goes into free fall yet again, where does that leave us? What's next, really?
Well, it's so many markets. It's not just the housing market. They're all intertwined. It's not like you're going to see the housing market plummet and stock markets held up or gold held down. it's all at one. They can't let the housing market fall, because housing market fall means that interest rates have well, either they've plummeted to zero because everyone's expecting hyperinflation, or they've surged, in which case all debt is destroyed and the country is destroyed. And of course, the economy would be destroyed and jobs would be lost. And under those conditions, even the most vigilant gold cartel on the planet won't be able to hold back the swarm of physical buying. So housing is just one part of the game. It's been the last vestige of bubbles, which they created after the stocks broke decidedly in 2000 to 2002 with the internet. And so really there's nothing left other than to just support everything at otherworldly levels as the real world falls apart. And of course, no one is benefiting from this except the Wall Street money that they get for free via ZERP and QE and all these other things.
Yeah. So really, what do you do here other than buying gold and silver and trying to eke out an existence till it all blows up? What do you do?
Well, if you're asking me from a financial perspective, it's very simple. Obviously, you want to hold your savings in physical gold and silver. You also want to be, if you can, I mean, it's not an option for many people. If you can, you want to, I would say, avoid debt. I certainly try to avoid it at all costs, because I know some people want to believe debt will be hyperinflated away. But until it's hyperinflated away, you're probably going to lose everything if you don't have a job. And there's no guarantee it will be hyperinflated away, or that the government will not change the rules like they did in Weimar Germany to not allow your personal debt to be hyperinflated away. I would say the two biggest dangers around are debt and paper money. And again, this is just the financial side of it. You also have to do other things as well to protect yourself.
Yeah, other things. You need survival tools, right? You got to have survival tools.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not telling you to be a prepper. I'm telling you to think about, what if the worst case scenario happens? I mean, don't you want to at least have some stores of food, some ammo, a dog? I mean, just, not have all your money sitting in a bank. I mean, I have pretty much none of mine sitting in a bank. So, think about it. I mean, if you don't think about it, you're going to be screwed. How can you have gone through 2008 and not thought about it? Because there really can't be anyone left aside from a banker on Wall Street who's gotten all this free money in the last 5 years to buy stocks in supported markets, who actually would believe that the world is any better. I mean, when you look at 2008, which was the worst of the worst, and you look at the statistics since then, I mean, the U.S. had $10 trillion in debt. Now it is $17.5 trillion plus $5 trillion off balance sheet with the aforementioned Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and of course those unfunded liabilities. The labor participation rate was 66-something%. Now it's barely 62%. And falling, and of course the quality of jobs are bad. Look at the unemployment rate in Europe. I think it was 8 or 9% then. Now it's 12.5%. Okay, I mean, that's the actual unemployment rate they publish. Forget what the real one is. Inflation. Think of what the cost of living was back in 2008 compared to what it is today. Heck, gasoline, food, insurance, all these things. I mean, and of course the incomes are lower, and the real income is far lower. So everyone knows things are much worse than they were back then. So why you can't be thinking that what happened then can't happen now, especially when Deutsche Bank today, during the so-called good times, is saying they desperately need money, is beyond me.
Yeah, that's for certain. So in the meantime, be prepared. That doesn't mean being a prepper, obviously, but it means taking care to get ready for the ultimate collapse of the system. And from where we go then, nobody really knows. Nobody really has an absolute idea, but we're getting glimmers though, right? We are getting glimmers of what's going to come next, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, history says the kind of things that happen. I mean, it's called inflation, it's called government oppression, war, hopefully not food shortages, but probably at some point. I mean, we're seeing them in places around the world right now. Certainly have seen them in Brazil, in Venezuela. I mean, they're happening. And look at the Arab Spring that happened a few years ago. And by the way, food prices are now higher in Egypt than they were back then. So, I mean, these things will happen in one way, shape, or form. And hopefully it's not the worst case of like World War III, but hey, I mean, look at how the U.S. is antagonizing Russia. Does it not look like or Syria or Iran? Does it not look like we want this to happen? I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but it won't be good. And if you haven't thought about the things we're talking about, you're probably going to be in big trouble.
Hey, by the way, we missed one major story, and that was in Switzerland. They were voting on a minimum wage of $24.10 an hour, and it got turned down, amazingly enough.
Yeah, I saw that. And, I can't speak for the Swiss economy. I'm sure it's better than most in Europe. But then again, I also know it has among the highest inflation in Europe because in large part because the Swiss National Bank, those bastions of conservatism, pegged
to the
Swiss
euro.
franc to the euro a few years ago. And by the way, sold 60% of their gold back 10, 15 years ago near the lows. People don't talk. They just talk about England's brown bottom. They don't talk about how the Swiss sold like 1,500 tons of gold at $400 or $500 an ounce. So, I mean, the fact that they're even talking about a $24 an ounce minimum wage shows you how bad inflation is in Europe. So when Draghi comes out and says, we need to go to negative rates in QE because deflation is such a problem, you can how anyone can't see that this is the biggest lie in the history of lies. If you look at the top 6 cities in the world, for gasoline prices, 5 of them are in Europe. Number 1 is Hong Kong, and then it's London, Paris, Berlin, Zurich. I mean, it's not just taxes. This is called inflation in the biggest possible way. And if they God forbid do start a real QE program, I mean, not just the covert stuff and the swaps they're doing with the Fed, but a real one, which it really sounds like they're going to do, I can't even comprehend what the prices are going to look like for gasoline and food in Europe.
Oh, yeah. And they're running out of time. They're going to have to do something.
Yeah. I mean, the Swiss National Bank, I just was reading the other day, they printed as much money as anyone else. And again, it's all down to propaganda. The Swiss, they are so into protecting your capital. Meanwhile, they're kicking American investors out. They've been pegging the currency, selling their gold. I mean, you can't trust anyone anymore. You really can't. There's certainly no country. There's no currency that's worth anything at all. There's no currency that's good as gold. The Swiss people want to have a referendum to reinstate gold backing the franc. And guess what? It just continually gets delayed and delayed and delayed. And they'll probably never vote on it because they know that's what the people want. And when you win one of those referendums, it happens.
I predict that they will have that referendum when the Fed audits our gold holdings.
They'll have that referendum when gold is surging past $2,000 or $3,000 an ounce, and they won't be able to buy the gold they need to back the franc.
It's just not going to happen. I mean, come on. It's like because all the people of the world want sound money. Every country's citizens want sound money, but you and I are not in control of things here as citizens of the world. Our desires come last, and that's the fact of the matter. Let's face it here. The world does not run based on the will of the people. The system's not designed that way. It's designed to give you the appearance that your will and your desires are taken into account, but the fact of the matter is nothing could be further from the truth here. Let's face it here.
Yeah, I mean, you'll just get. I saw there was some campaign ads on TV yesterday for Colorado. I don't know. I think we have senator coming up this year, and it's like this guy says he's fighting for jobs and for equality and for higher wages and for blah blah blah. And I'm going. I mean, really, are there really people in the world who really believe that this particular guy wants these things, and all the other politicians who all said that they wanted the same things but didn't get it really means it? I mean,
yeah, right.
At some point, the people don't believe the politicians anymore that they're going to do
sure hope not.
Anything that helps them, because again, it's all about your own personal financial status. And right now, the labor market, the savings situation, the inflation situation are as bad as at any time in our lifetime, in generations. So for anyone from Obama down to say, yes, everything is great, we're doing all these great things, is beyond. The only saving grace is that so many people have given up that they just don't care anymore, and they'll just be like, fine, just give me my food stamps, so that's fine.
Yeah, I feel your pain. And on that note, you find Andy and Bill Holter's daily newsletters at milesfranklin.com. And don't forget, go over to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Sign up for our newsletter. Got a good one coming out about the housing crisis part 2. And we'll talk to you next Tuesday because of the holiday. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right. You be well. Good week ahead.
Yep.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.